Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Waiver wire, trades, roster management. To win in fantasy football, you must remember one simple rule. Never get out hustled. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
Week one's in the books, folks. How we doing out there? It's time to hustle. Welcome in, everybody. It is the Fantasy Football Hustle. I am Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com, joined alongside the man you're looking to get the info from. That is FootballGuys.com writer Dwain McFarland. Dwain, how we doing out there, pal? How was week one for you?
I'm going to be honest, Drake. Week one was a little bit rough, but after doing the research and going back through, each of the games, at least, from a utilization perspective, I still feel pretty good about, the rosters that I've built through the summer. Some of them, went nuts, but I had several that didn't do. Some of my teams I thought would do better didn't do as well, but still feeling pretty good about where they are overall now that I've looked at all this stuff.
So this is the Fantasy Football Hustle. You can follow us on Twitter at FFHustle. Follow Dwain at Dwain McFarland on Twitter. DWAIN is how you spell that. I'm at Drake Fantasy. We are proud members of the FulltimeFantasy.com podcast network. Check everything out over there at FulltimeFantasy.com. And what we're going to do today, guys, is you've come to this show because you love the football talk, the X's and O's, the coaching theory, and why things happen that Dwain gives you. So what we're going to do here is it's not just going to be the typical, hey, go pick up this guy because he had a great week this week. No, we want to give you the meat and potatoes on each team, what they did, what they're going to do going forward, how it's impacted Dwain's season-long projections, and you're going to be a better fantasy player because of it. We're going to start off things, Dwain, in Kansas City, where, the number one receiver in fantasy last year, Tyreek Hill, is hurt and he's out for a while. Didn't stop the Chiefs at all as they boat raced the Jacksonville Jaguars. What do we see here with this Kansas City offense? Are we now looking into, obviously, folks, if you're in a shallow league, pick up Sammy Watkins. That's first and foremost. But we're going to be looking at guys like Mecole Hardman. Are we looking at Demarcus Robinson? And they've got a backfield here we need to talk about. So let's start talking about the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, Watkins is the guy that gets the primary bump. He's going to be owned in most leagues, but what folks need to realize is you need to get him in your lineup. Don't think that this is a fluke. Sammy Watkins is an elite receiver. I actually wrote a piece about him last year for Matt Waldman at mattwaldmanrsp.com. You can Google Dwain McFarland, Sammy Watkins, and you can quickly read that article. But I break down all the facets to Sammy Watkins' game and why he's such a good fit with Andy Reid in this system and with Pat Mahomes. And we're just seeing it all come to fruition. The guy's a great run after the catch player. I expect him to easily see 25% plus of the targets each week. This last week, you saw 32%. He was on the field for 96% of the snaps. And everybody saw it. The guy went nuts. His average depth of target, Drake, was only 9.3, yet puts up nearly 200 yards. Why? Because he's a beast with the ball in his hands. So think back to the years when Andy Reid had Jeremy Maclin, right? And he had Deshaun Watson working deep. Deshaun Jackson, working deep. And so we had a similar thing going here with Hill and Watkins. Well, now Watkins is just going to absorb more of those targets with Tyreek Hill out of the game. So it's going to be him and Travis Kelce. If you are in, a medium or deep size league, Mecole Hardman is going to be a must add. Now, he did not do much with his opportunities this week, and this is something that I'll probably break down with Jay Moyer on, a podcast that I'll do later this week for the RSP whenever we do fantasy film and data, because Jay's not a believer in Hardman's ability, so we'll get more into that. But he's still a must-own right now because he's in the Chiefs' offense, and he played on 79% of the routes, on 79% of the dropbacks Pat Mahomes had. He was in a route. And that number is going to be probably around the same next week, maybe even a little bit higher. So anytime you have someone that's going to be on the field with Pat Mahomes running routes, he's a must own in most formats. So if you're in a medium to deep size, you have to own him. In a shallower league, you may have some tough decisions about who to drop. But if you're really hurting at receiver, maybe you own an Anthony Miller or somebody like that. I would much rather own McCole Hardman than an Anthony Miller. Demarcus Robinson in deeper leagues is a guy that should also be rostered. He ran routes on 68% of Mahomes' dropbacks, Drake, and he played on 63% of the snaps, saw 6% of the targets. So I do expect it to flow through Watkins and Hardman. I do think that this probably gives Damian Williams a little bit of a bump in the passing game, and maybe even a little bit to McCoy as well, because Andy Reid's a guy, let's face it, he's going to want to get it to his playmakers. So I think he's going to give Hardman the first chance to really be the new number 3. But I don't know that it's something where, he's going to get 22, 24% like what we saw with Tyreek Hill. And the reason why is his application is just much more limited. He's a great deep threat, but he's struggling with press coverage and things like that.
So let's quickly touch on this backfield. I know a lot of people were concerned about it. Damian Williams did get 19 touches. McCoy kind of outshined him because he had 93 yards, but he only had 11 touches. Damian Williams did score a TD. I think he had another one called back. Any quick thoughts on this backfield?
Yeah, I think that McCoy is going to eat more into Damian Williams' carries every week. And in fact, my gut says this is going to end up being a 50-50 situation because LaShawn McCoy just didn't have much time to prep. And Andy Reid said it. He said, yeah, LaShawn McCoy played with me a long time ago. He goes, but all of the protections, all of the blitz pickups, all of those things are now different in this game. And so I expected Damian Williams to get about 65% of the snaps this week, and that's what he got. He got 66%. LaShawn McCoy saw 30%, but McCoy looked much better. I mean, if you're Damian Williams and you can only average 1.8 yards per carry in this offense, I mean, no offense, it is a small sample, but he didn't look good. He looked really good as a receiver, though, so I don't see him giving up that role to McCoy. I do think McCoy can eat into that a little bit, but I think Damian Williams these next few weeks probably still is going to hold an RB2, RB3 value. And I think McCoy, though, is going to start pushing up into that range, and probably not an RB2, but maybe an RB3 range within the next couple of weeks. We'll have to monitor and see what's going on. But LaShawn McCoy is a must-own in all leagues. So if you're in a shallower league or if you're in a medium-sized league, you should definitely be rostering LaShawn McCoy, because there's also a scenario, Drake, where I see him just pass Damian Williams. At this point, I don't really see a scenario where Damian Williams just holds him at bay and is like, I get 70% of the work and you get 30. Just watching them on the field, I mean, I don't know if you went back and rewatched the game. This is one that I watched quite a bit of. McCoy just looked like the better player.
I'm a big fan of LaShawn McCoy. I think he's going to have a nice year as long as he stays healthy. Let's switch gears and go over to the Pittsburgh Steelers now, where a guy we've been talking about, since we started the podcast, it seems, is James Washington. And there are cries all across the football world now that James Washington needs more work. But as we've said on this show, he's playing behind Juju Smith-Schuster. Juju was shut down. That's what Bill Belichick does. James Conner didn't do a whole lot in this affair either. It was just a real bad night for the Steelers offense. What are we seeing here in Pittsburgh? Are they going to have to move Washington to Moncrief's side of the field? Because Moncrief just can't catch a cold.
Yeah, I'll be very interested to see what happens here. When I watch Dante Moncrief, it's not something I talk a lot about, but body language-wise, I mean, he just looked like a guy that just, like, the stage was too big. He just looked like he just wanted to just shrink into nothing and just leave the field. Ben went to him multiple times, 21% of the targets. He was the most targeted guy in the offense. So Dante Moncrief, you can't just go drop. Right? Because, players can bounce back and they can do better. But what we saw is in tight windows and contested areas, Moncrief just couldn't hang on. Anytime the ball was contested, it was a drop. Mm-hmm. So James Washington, 61% of the dropbacks Ben had, Washington was running a route. I had estimated that would be somewhere between 30 and 60% per week. And I think in this game script, you saw it come true. But here's the problem. They still don't trust him. With this game completely out of hand, he can't get on the field more than that. He can't. I mean, he was on the field for 50% of the snaps, Drake. And if you saw the way they used him, it was very limited. It was, hey, dude, go deep. Go deep. And even then, he ran a bad route that Chris Collinsworth called out, where he didn't push the edge of the boundary to get away from the safety in the middle of the field and made Ben throw a pick. I mean, it's the same kind of things going on over and over. The guy has elite talent. He should be owned. In medium and in deeper leagues, because there's definitely a chance that he gets to take on more of a role. Here's the problem. He's still not beating press coverage. He's still not running great routes. And he's only being used in a certain way. So you're going to have to be patient with him. He's not a guy that you can just grab and immediately stick in your lineup. I mean, Ryan Switzer, who we talked about on this show last week, played 69% of the snaps, ran routes on 76% of Ben Roethlisberger's dropbacks. And James Washington's not going to take his role because Switzer is that get open super quick off the line of scrimmage guy whenever you need a quick first down. That's not what James Washington does.
Anything else with the Steelers?
Yeah, just quickly. Yeah, real quick. James Conner playing 46% of the snaps. That was a major eye-opener. I do not know what's going on there. I anticipated Conner to easily handle 70 to 80% of the snaps. So I haven't read anything saying that he was dinged or anything like that. Now, this was a blowout. I mean, they were getting destroyed. So they were getting other people on the field. Jalen Samuels was on the field for 33% of the snaps. They actually went empty quite often, I think, to try to get James Washington and Deontay Johnson and some of these other guys onto the field. So that's just something to watch. I'm not going to freak out about James Conner. He still had 77% of the rushes. Jalen Samuels only had 15%. So I think a lot of this is just game script dependency. I think in games when Steelers are tighter, keeping things close, we'll probably see James Conner's routes per drop back up in the 50-60% range, but just something to keep an eye on, Drake.
If you're a Steelers fan, your second favorite team is obviously the New England Patriots, and they're going to have a new shiny toy this week in Antonio Brown, and we're not going to bore you with all the Antonio Brown stuff. You guys know what the hell happened out there with that moron. But Sony Michel ran 15 times for 14 yards in a game that they were destroying the Pittsburgh Steelers. I started Sony Michel in a league. I felt the pain of his horrible performance. I'm a little nervous here, Dwayne, although I think when you have Gordon and AB out there, he's going to be running against light boxes, but he needs to be in there getting the rock.
Yeah, I'm actually extremely worried because here's what I see. The Patriots have already shifted away from any kind of two tight end look, and really they're still using James Devlin, some, as a fullback out there, but they're just not going heavy a lot. And that's what they were doing last year. And so I think what you see is Bill Belichick and this coaching staff, they're adapting again. They're like, oh, we got Julian Edelman. We got Josh Gordon. Even Philip Dorsett made plays in this game, which now Philip Dorsett's going to freaking be Antonio Brown. I think they're already prepping. I've already changed my rest of the way rankings. I got Tom Brady in my top 8 quarterbacks. I think we've just already seen a shift, and this is very, 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 very bad news for Sony Michel because Rex Burkhead was on the field for 46% of the snaps, Drake. Sony Michel was out there 33%. Now, he led the team in rushes with 50%. Here's what you're going to need from Sony Michel. You're going to need him to score touchdowns. You need him to be in the game getting those inside the 5 carries. The Patriots didn't have any carries inside the 5 this week, so there weren't any there to be had. I think that's where Michel's value is going to come from. But right now, I'm just as concerned as you. I think his carries will be there. I think he's still going to hit that 200 attempt, 215 mark, which is what I projected him for to start the season. But any thought of him really having value as a pass catcher is gone. We're going to need touchdowns. I'm with you. I'm very worried. It's a 3-headed monster like always.
And we don't know exactly how they're going to employ Antonio Brown, but one can imagine he's going to see his share of targets. I'm not sure we even need to play the rest of the year because the Patriots are obviously going to win the Super Bowl. But, if we'll humor everyone, we'll keep playing.
Dude, it's crazy how they keep doing this. If you're in a super deep league, Burkhead is worth a pickup. Dorsett, don't even worry about it. Yeah, he looked good. Poor guy can't catch a break, has the game of his life. And here comes Antonio Brown. He'll be the 4th option. Edelman is the engine of this passing offense, and if they go away from the run, Drake, and they do not run the ball quite as much, it will actually insulate Julian Edelman's role, even with Antonio Brown arriving, because Julian Edelman, if you look where he's operating, 6.9 yards average depth of target. He's basically acting like a running back. He's the short running game, helping out with James White and Burkhead, who each had an average depth of target of 2.6 and 2.1, and so it could be matchup dependent. The Steelers tend to be pretty heavy, as far as, their front 7. So the Patriots historically have spread the Steelers out. So that's something to remember as well. But when I think about the tight ends here, Drake, I don't see any reason to try to get tight ends on the field. They don't have any.
Yeah. And you don't have to worry about quarterback if you have Tom Brady. A lot of people had him on the wire or got him as a QB too. Just plug him in there every week now. Another guy you might have taken late is our pal Matt Waldman's summer crush, Lamar Jackson. And, he played against the high school team this week, but Lamar went 17 of 20 for 324 and 5 touchdowns. Holy smokes. He'll never have a better matchup than that. Miami is a total joke. They're a flag football team out there. But There are some things we need to talk about here, specifically in the backfield where you think Gus Jackson is, or Gus, get on the Gus bus. Yeah, if I could talk here. It's only noon. Usually when we tape this show, guys, it's like 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I'm having a beer. Now it's 1:20 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, so I'm sitting here with my nice water bottle. But let's talk about this backfield and why you think that we need to own more than just Mark Ingram.
Drake, you're like Clinton Portis and those guys. Do you improve like with Hennessy? If you like just, drink a bunch before it's game time?
I'm a Hennessy salesman. That's what I do in real life. That's what pays for my pool in the backyard. So,
yeah, man. So here's the big storyline, on the Ravens. Beware. The offense looks really good, but man, it's just what we saw last year, Drake. Everybody is playing. So look at this. Okay, Gus Edwards, 38% of the snaps. Mark Ingram, 33% of the snaps. 29% of the snaps to Justice Hill. And I have people come to me on Twitter and say, well, it's just because of the game flow. No, go look at last year. This is what they did. I do think that held Ingram down a little bit. I expect him to be around 45 to 50%. Here's the rush attempts. 38% to Gus Edwards, 31% to Mark Ingram, 16% to Justice Hill. This is not new. I've been tweeting about this all preseason, showing what that offense looked like once Greg Roman took over last year when Lamar Jackson became the quarterback, like week 11. We're seeing the same exact thing. I do think Ingram, will be around 45% of the rushes. I don't see him being as low as 31. I do think Gus Edwards got a slight bump up because, they were so far ahead, like you said, of the dumpster fire Dolphins. So just remember, though, when matchups get a little tougher, that's going to impact this team. The other thing I saw with Lamar Jackson, you mentioned him, he was hitting deep balls, which was much better. Drake, on like next gen, one of my favorite stats is the plus minus completion percentage based on all the scenarios that he threw the ball. He was a plus 25% completion rate this weekend. Jesus. That's amazing, but it also screams of regression. So while I think Lamar Jackson looked really good, I think he hit passes that were literally receivers are open by 5 yards. That just, they're going to put more teams in that kind of bind, but it won't be as much as what we saw with Miami. So that's just something to keep in mind. So if you think about the receivers, same thing. Routes per dropback, Seth Roberts, 64%, Willie Snead, 61%, Chris Moore, 50%, Miles Boykin, 29%, Marquise Brown, 29%, only 18% of the snaps. Tap the brakes, folks. You need to be careful. Do not go spend your whole budget on Marquise Brown. I'm not saying don't go pick him up. The guy's explosive, and they're going to use him, and they're obviously designing stuff for him. But he's also a player that do not be surprised. You go put him in your lineup, and you get a literal 0.
Guy played 12 snaps and
yes,
went 4 for 157 and 2 touchdowns.
Now, I see his role expanding as things go on, but remember, it's not just about being receiver. This team runs the ball a lot, and Seth Roberts and Willie Snead and Chris Moore, those guys are they're gritty blockers. They do a lot of other things. So the good news for Marquise Brown is they're obviously scheming him up. When he's on the field, the play is designed to go to him. So there's something to be said for that. Now, Mark Andrews, same damn situation. 41% of the snaps, but he gets a 31% target share. He could just as easily be at a 5% targets, come next week. Now, I like Mark Andrews. I love the talent. I like Marquise Brown. I like the talent. Just be careful, folks. It's not. So, for example, if you're carrying Mark Andrews and you've also got another tight end because you thought, he may be a bit up and down. If you need to, great. You can go drop your backup, but I wouldn't be super quick about it if I'm in a deep league or a tight end premium type of league. You're going to hit some bumps on the road with Mark Andrews, with Marquise Brown, with all of these guys. Now, I expect Marquise Brown's role to grow, Drake. So if you're in a medium to larger type league, I still think Marquise Brown, is a guy that you want to target. The problem is, I can literally see him going for over 50% of somebody's fab budget, and there will be times he'll go for more. I'm not willing to put that bet down on a team that's probably going to pass the ball 25 times a game, and he's going to be a rotational player. I just, it'd be different if I thought all of a sudden he was going to grow into a role where he was seeing 70 to 80% of the snaps. For me, he's a 25, 30% of your fab budget kind of guy if you want to bet on his upside because you're really hurting at receiver, but you got to know the risk that comes with it.
Big news on Sunday morning was the fact that Adrian Peterson was a healthy scratch for the Washington Redskins. They wanted to put Darius Geis in the game, and there was a great soundbite that somebody got from Coach Jay Gruden, and they said, hey, why is AP inactive. And he kind of snarkily came back and he goes, well, if we were going to line up and the game plan was to run him out of I formation 30 times, we'd have him active for the game. I was like, holy smokes. Guess what? Darius Geis got hurt. Now you need AP again. But I think the better play, if you're in a PPR league, is Chris Thompson, who had 10 targets for a team that's going to be trailing a ton. There's also a receiver we're going to talk about, but let's start with this backfield here. AP, Chris Thompson, what are we doing? We don't want to invest in bad teams, but I mean, Jesus, the opportunity here is too great.
Yeah, a couple things. One, your Eagles secondary is freaking atrocious.
They've been bad for years.
Yeah.
We can outscore people. That's the whole point.
Yeah, but Jesus, that's terrible. You had a whole offseason to fix it. Good God, Eagles. That Cowboys looked way better than the Eagles in week 1. I did not expect to say that. Now, the Redskins came out, made it a game. I didn't expect that. I expected the Eagles to blow the Redskins' doors off. Now, I'll give, Case Keenum, some credit. Here's what's going to happen though, guys. This offense is going to get shut down, and it's not going to take long because there's nothing there. Terry McLaurin, fine. You want to add him because you're in a mid-size or deeper-size league. I will say that the guy played well. He ran routes on 89% of the dropbacks, for the team. So he's the guy to own, but I would not go crazy with my, fab budget because this is not going to be a good team, and you're going to struggle. Trey Quinn also on the field for 98% of the snaps, only saw 11% of the targets. This is also a very balanced team. So nobody's getting all of it. To your point, Chris Thompson was the most targeted guy, 18%. This is a dink and dunk kind of offense for the most part. So I'm still not super interested in it. I do believe, like I said, in a deeper league, McLaurin should be owned. Medium-sized leagues, again, an Anthony Miller type, and you just want to move on, I'm fine with that. Chris Thompson, to your point, is the running back to own because this team's going to trail, and they're going to trail a lot. I don't care that they led the Eagles for, basically 3 quarters. I just don't see that continuing on because I hate to sound, I do hate the Redskins because I'm a Cowboys fan, but from a standpoint of analyzing football, I'm not just trying to be a Redskins hater. They just don't have enough talent. It's Darius Geis was a key piece for him. He's gone. Jordan Reed can't stay healthy. Vernon Davis is 50 years old. Trey Quinn's a slot receiver. Paul Richardson can't stay healthy. Terry McLaurin's a rookie. They don't really have a quarterback. This thing's going to fall apart very quickly. Chris Thompson is a must-own, though, to your point, Drake. AP in a deeper league, you can go grab him. The problem is it's like, what do you do? Do you really want the running back on a team that's going to be trailing probably 65% of their plays this season? I'm with you. It's a Chris Thompson play.
Early in the season, this is kind of where you can shift the balance of power in your league and you can change your roster up because these guys early often are difference makers. If you remember Phillip Lindsay last year, people got him and all of a sudden, boom, you've got a top 15 running back for the rest of the season. Don't forget, Chris Thompson, outside of the year he was hurt, has had 2 out of the last 3 years. He was a top 30 PPR running back, so it's not like this guy's a bum.
Well, he's been hurt every year, but yes, when he plays, his points per snap are elite.
Speaking of playing, there was a game late last night when many of us were in bed, and that was the Oakland Raiders going out and getting the W. They had a lot of fun chants in the crowd if you were listening on the game, and Gruden and the boys go out and they say, forget wiretapping laws, we're going to go and we're going to win some ball games. Josh Jacobs looked fantastic. Obviously, he's drafted in all your leagues, but there's a couple of guys on that team who may not have been. Darren Waller at tight end, I think, is a must-add, and just start putting him in your lineup, all right? He played 100% of the snaps. This guy is legit. He's going to be a top 10 tight end, probably higher than that. Get him in there. And if you got Tyrell Williams in a shallow league, maybe he's available. But this guy's going to be an every week wide receiver 3, I think, at the worst, Dwayne.
Yeah, hopefully, if you're following me on Twitter, these were preemptive. I put out a couple of tweets around this last week, and my first one being that Darren Waller is the guy to own in this offense. So hopefully, you scooped him up for nothing last week. If you didn't, and you're sitting on, Kyle Rudolph, a guy we'll talk about later. Now, there's a lot going on with game script, but we'll talk about Kyle in a little bit. Darren Waller, in one of my tweets, I actually mentioned, as being over. I liked him above Greg Olsen. I liked him above Jimmy Graham, liked him above Delaney Walker, who had a solid week, but I still like him above all of those guys. I like him above Jordan Reed. I like him above Austin Hooper. So Darren Waller's, he's a must own in pretty much every type of format. And I could see him being the focal point of this offense along with Jordan Reed. We saw that Derek Carr went to Jared Cook quite often as his top target last year. And I think that Darren Waller actually has more upside than Jared Cook. So I'm very excited about him. Tyrell Williams, just to your point, he should be owned in all formats. What I saw last night that I really liked about Tyrell Williams, Drake, is with AB gone, they didn't just use him as the deep guy. He did get some deep balls, and he caught a great one on a third down, that kept them, in a great position to win that game, which they did. But he was being used on a wider variety of routes. So with Antonio Brown gone, they're doing more to scheme Tyrell Williams into the game plan than just let him run deep, which is the thing you wanted to see. If you own Josh Jacobs, you should be excited. I know you may think, 3.5 yards per carry or whatever. That's a pretty good Denver defense, not a superior offensive line for the Raiders. So that's going to be something to watch. But here's the big thing, man. Jalen Richard didn't see the field. This guy's getting all of it. So this guy is now worth more than Kerryon Johnson right now. He's worth more than Devonta Freeman right now. He's worth more than Derrick Henry right now. We'll talk about Henry in a minute. Right now, you can make an argument with us knowing what Josh Jacobs' role, Drake, he's going to be a borderline top 12 running back every week. So if you own him, be grateful. If you think you can go buy him because somebody may not be buying into that low yards per carry, don't worry about it. Go get the volume.
If you're looking for some volume this week, you might want to go check out my boy Matt Breida. He's a guy who I wrote over on FightingChanceFantasy.com is like my breakout player of the year just because of the opportunities available in this backfield. Lo and behold, he had a horrible game this week. He was kind of in and out of the lineup, which is what he does. But Tevin Coleman got hurt, and he's going to miss a few weeks. So Breida is the next man up in this Kyle Shanahan offense. If you're on the waiver wire looking for help and you're in a deeper league, I think Raheem Mostert could be a plug-and-play guy. He's going to get some work. It's not like he's going to come in and get you a 0. In terms of the wide receivers, we used to love Dante Pettis here on this show. We still do, but oh boy, Dwayne, the guy played 2 snaps.
Yeah, so Breida is obviously a must-own. He's probably gone in most leagues, but if you're in a shallow league, go ahead and look at it. If you're in a mid-sized to deeper league, Raheem Mostert needs to be rostered. Mid-sized leagues, that's like a 10-man league. It may be questionable because it could push you into, having to make a decision around someone else like a Justice Hill or someone like that. I wouldn't go Mostert over them. Mm-hmm. But Mostert really is literally one injury away from being the lead running back in Kyle Shanahan's scheme. And we know Matt Breida is not exactly, a picture of health. This is a guy that battled injuries. Now he played through many injuries last year, but Breida could easily, and actually Breida was being checked for a concussion. Yeah. I'm not sure what the latest is on that. So, that is floating out there. I haven't followed that story up yet, but Mostert is a guy that in your medium and especially in your deep size leagues, needs to be owned. Tevin Coleman sounds like it's probably a high ankle sprain. He was in a boot after the game. He's definitely not playing this next week. And then they say, hey, it's up in the air after that, but he's definitely missing time. You don't want to go crazy on a guy like Mostert, but 5 to 10%, of your budget. If, you're really hurting at runner and you need something, to plug in due to injury, a lot of injuries this past weekend, or maybe you're the Tevin Coleman owner. Mostert is a guy that could make sense, for you to roster if you're really in a tight spot. As far as the receivers, Drake, you're right. I don't know what to say, about Dante Pettis. Now, he had a growing injury that had limited him. Maybe that has something to do with it. But we're very, very close to just calling Dante Pettis a drop. Mm-hmm. If you're in a shallower league, just drop him. Just move on. If you're in a mid-sized league, you may have a tough decision this week because you've got other guys that are going to be on your wire. They're going to look appealing. If you're in a deep league, he's going to be a hold. Now, Deebo Samuel's a buy. Drake, 89% of the times that Jimmy Garoppolo dropped back to pass, Deebo Samuel's running routes. Played 88% of the snaps. Marquise Goodwin is a buy. 79% of the times that Garoppolo dropped back, he was running routes. Those two guys, I think, would have been much more involved if Tampa Bay didn't just suck. Jameis Winston played terrible. He killed the game script. This was a game that we thought would be much more competitive. And if it had been, I believe those two guys are going to be more involved. Obviously, George Kittle, if you own him, just pat yourself on the back. 37% of the targets. The dude is the 1A, the 1B, and the 1C. But Deebo Samuel and Marquise Goodwin in medium and in deep size leagues need to be owned. I would prioritize Deebo Samuel first. In fact, I would guess that I haven't ranked it out in a list form yet, Drake, but Deebo Samuel's in the type of leagues I play in, which are deep, I don't even play in medium-sized leagues.
High
He's a
stakes,
must.
pal.
He's a must. Yeah. High stakes, pal, not low stakes, pal. He's the guy. He's a guy that's a must own. Debo's a guy that's a must own with what's going on with Pettis. And remember this, folks, Samuel is a guy that they liked in the draft. Yeah, they liked Pettis last year, but it's just a lot of things are stacking up in favor of him and now against Pettis. If you go back to even some of the stuff that we talked about in the preseason, which is Pettis just not being physical enough, blah, blah, blah. Shanahan just seems to have a thing for these other guys.
A guy I tweeted out last week could be a league winner was DK Metcalf. I have a huge man crush on this guy. I'm off my Damian Williams man crush. It's on to DK Metcalf. 6 targets, 4 catches for 89 yards for the big rookie out in Seattle. Guy looks good. And Tyler Lockett, hey, welcome to life after Doug Baldwin. You're going to see double teams all over the field, and it's not going to be easy pickings for you. I think Metcalf's a guy, if you're in a shallower mid-sized league, could be available. Definitely want to scoop him up. And boy, Chris Carson, holy schmoly. If you got him in the 2nd, 3rd round, God bless you. You're sitting on a top 5 running back.
Yeah, so DK Metcalf, good switch, man. Good switch. I like the switch to DK. 92% of the time that Russell Wilson dropped back to pass, DK Metcalf was running a route. That's really good, Drake. Only played 78% of the snaps, but that doesn't really matter. If you're running routes every time Russ is dropping back, that's a good thing. DK is locked in as the number 2 target in this team. Number 1 will still be Tyler Lockett. If you own him, just chill. Just chill. Many teams won't have the capability to scheme to handle Lockett. He's getting a lot of protection in the slot at 65%. This is a guy that can beat you deep. He can beat you intermediate. There's still a lot of ways for him to win. It's a game where, honestly, the Seahawks just didn't have to pass a lot, Drake. And the Seahawks just don't pass a lot, period. It's funny because the game was close or they were trailing, but they just do their thing, right? They like to run the ball, and that's going to continue. But I expect Tyler Lockett to be fine. Chris Carson, to your point, I don't really have anything else to say. 35% of the targets, Drake. 35%. Dude had 7 targets. We heard this preseason from the offensive coordinator, Schottenheimer. He said, the best way to handle this, help offset some of the losses. They want to get the running backs more involved in the passing game. And they did. And guess what? Rashad Penny, you didn't do anything, dude. I expected Penny's value, since he kind of tanked through the preseason as a running the ball. He looked terrible. I thought, well, maybe he can salvage something as a pass catcher. No. Hold my beer, buddy. Hold my beer, Chris Carson said. 71% of the times that Russ dropped back to pass, it was Carson running a route. Rashad Penny, only 17%, Drake. He couldn't even get on the field. 27% of the snaps. Dude's lost. It's over. 15-6 carries Carson to Penny. Rashad Penny owners, I don't hold a lot of hope, man. I just don't hold a lot of hope. Yep. You're not going to drop him unless you're in a shallower league. You got to hold him in medium and deep leagues. But outside of that, man, you cannot be putting this guy in your lineup. But DK Metcalf is he needs to be owned in every league. If you can go target Tyler Lockett now for a trade, go do it.
Just like we all thought after week 1, the NFL leader in targets is Jamison Crowder from the Jets. So after, I believe he had 17 targets, for the Jets, who just Adam Gase one away. Oh my God, how they lost this game to Buffalo, who looked atrocious in the first half. Josh Allen being Josh Allen. Don't tweet me, Bills Mafia. Josh Allen's garbage. So, yeah, he is.
Tweet him, please, Bills Mafia. Yeah, tweet him.
I don't care. So with the Jets, Le'Veon Bell looked like Le'Veon Bell. Had a really nice few catches out there and getting in the end zone. So what'd you see from our boys here in New York?
Yeah, number 1, the passing attack is short and evenly distributed is what I think it will ultimately be. This week we had Robbie Anderson injured, Drake, coming off that calf injury. I do believe that impacted it. If you follow me on Twitter, I did give you the little tidbit before games tipped off for DFS that Jamison Crowder was in play. Now, to be fair and, to go ahead and, give myself a black mark as well, I said Quincy Enunwa could be the other pivot. Yeah, he did jack crap. He was out there 96% of the time that the team was throwing, but only saw 7% of the targets. It's clear that Jamison Crowder, is a guy that Sam Darnold loves. And even when Robbie Anderson's healthy, I still think the guy's going to hold value. To your point, 15 targets, 37% of the targets. Here's the other thing. This is a team that's going to run 11 personnel. This team's going to run they're going to run 11 as much as the Rams. These three receivers are going to be out there, and Enunwa will have value in deeper leagues, folks. You watch. If you're in a super deep league, Enunwa's still going to have his weeks. This week it was Crowder. Sorry, Drake, you were about to jump in.
No, I'm trying to just speeding us along here. Folks, Dwayne and I, every time the show starts, we go, we're going to be so succinct with this show, and we're going to just cruise through all these teams. We're 35 minutes into the show. We've touched 9 teams.
I think that's pretty freaking awesome.
For our face,
people can just listen to it on 2X.
There you go. All right, let's go down to Tennessee, where Marcus Mariota isn't a very good quarterback, but wow, he had quite the week.
Hey, last thing quickly on the Jets.
Yes.
You hit it, but I just have to say it. Le'Veon Bell, holy crap. Lock him up, dude. Drake, there's no way he can't be an RB1. 100% of the snaps. The only other person that did that yesterday at runner was who? CMC. 15% of Drake, he was running routes on 98% of the time Sam Darnold dropped back.
Oh, it looks fantastic.
Anyway, so moving on. If you can go buy him because the production didn't quite match the volume, that volume, it doesn't matter if the Jets stink the rest of the year. That's going to be an elite runner.
A name you're going to hear about on the waiver wire all over the place is A.J. Brown, the rookie out of Ole Miss. I think we need to slow down with this just because this is kind of a low-octane offense. Maybe he's the best receiver they have, Dwayne, but sell me on A.J. Brown if you can. I don't feel like I'm going to go out and prioritize him if I need a wide receiver this week.
Yeah, the thing for A.J. Brown is that he just looked amazing. And here's the deal. If you guys follow Matt Waldman, which if you're not, you should, at Matt Waldman on Twitter, he's of RSP fame. A.J. Brown, he said if there's one player, he called this. He said if there's one receiver this year that could do what Odell Beckham Jr. did as a rookie, he put his chip on A.J. Brown. And so now the guy comes out and does this in week 1. He definitely has my attention. To your point, it's an offense that limits itself because 60% of the time that Mariota dropped back, A.J. Brown was on the field. Now, that was number 2 to only Corey Davis and Delaney Walker. Delaney Walker was 67%. A.J. Brown was 60%. But what do we have here? What we really have right now so far, I don't know if it'll hold. We have a very similar situation to the Ravens. A lot of guys rotating through the lineup and seeing snaps. So that's going to have to rectify itself. Here's what I will say, though. In medium leagues, A.J. Brown, if you have room, you can add him. In deep leagues, A.J. Brown needs to be owned because he is a guy that could eat into more and more and more. Tajay Sharp still saw 49% of the snaps to Brown's 42%.
He's still in the league?
I see A.J. Brown taking that role away. I just see A.J. Brown moving up each week, and we'll trend this for people. We'll stay on it. Here's the crazy thing, Drake. Adam Humphries only ran routes on 43% of the times Mariota dropped back. Well, what happened? They got ahead. They blew the doors off the Browns. The Titans are the quintessential example of what it looks like to have very game script dependent scenarios. The Titans will either be one or the other. They will go run heavy as any run heavy team can be when they're leading, even whenever they're tied. But once they go to trailing, that's where a guy like Adam Humphries is going to be able to get more involved. So Humphries, if you're in a shallow league, you can dump him because you're not going to want to deal with it. If you're in a medium sized league, you can probably dump him unless you feel like reading the tea leaves each week on if are the Titans going to be behind or are they going to be ahead. That might have been easier to do with all the good quarterbacks that were in the AFC South. Well, them all dropping like flies. I don't necessarily know who the Tennessee Titans even have to play against outside of Deshaun Watson. So Humphries is on the downswing. In the deepest of deep leagues, Adam Humphries needs to be held. A.J. Brown needs to be owned. Corey Davis, man, I'm worried, Drake. 70%, only 73% of the snaps. You can't put him in your lineup at this point, but he's not a drop yet. Derrick Henry played from ahead. He did exactly what we expect. I know a lot of people thinking, oh, man, Derrick Henry's supposed to suck. He's the same thing that we thought he was. When the team is blowing another team out, he gets all of his carries. 70% of his points last year came when his team was leading. Guess what? Tennessee was leading this whole game because Baker Mayfield decided to come out and just chunk interceptions for a living. So that's what happened. Deion Lewis was still on the field for 41% of the snaps, 33% of the dropbacks, saw 17% of the targets. Derrick Henry, it was encouraging to see him in a few more routes and to get a pass. I think you've even brought this up, Drake. You're like, just dump it to the guy in the flat. How's a cornerback ever going to tackle him? That's exactly what happen. He just housed it, for 75 yards. The cornerback did not want any part of him. So that's the Tennessee Titans.
I saw this on Twitter. It's a great stat. Since 1950, there've only been 17 wide receivers to break 100 yards in their first career game. 3 of the 17 happened this weekend with Hollywood Brown, A.J. Brown, and Terry McLaurin. Interesting stat.
Yep.
Saw that from Bobby Koch on Twitter, so we'll give him a little credit there.
Nice.
Let's move it along to the Los Angeles Rams. So the Rams probably should have lost this game, to be honest. Again, another team choking one away. Everyone's going to point to the usage of Todd Gurley and the fact that Malcolm Brown got the goal line work and scored a pair of touchdowns here. What do you make from this? Was this kind of just Gurley's preseason? Or should we be buying into Malcolm Brown? Does he have some standalone value and you can flex him each week?
I think you're going to struggle to flex Malcolm Brown. I definitely wouldn't do it this week. Now, if we see that again this week, then I think you have more of a leg to lean on. Here's the problem. When you only get 28% of the snaps and 34% of the rushes on a team, that's tough. Yes, he got the 2 carries inside the 5, and Darrell Henderson got 1. Todd Gurley got 0. So they're high leverage snaps. I just don't know, Drake, that we can trust it to continue because, honestly, Todd Gurley didn't look bad. In the second half, he kind of got rolling, looked kind of like the old Todd Gurley we were used to. Todd Gurley, here's the thing about him that's going to keep him fantasy viable no matter what. 71% of the times Jared Goff dropped back to pass, he was in a route. Malcolm Brown, only 15%. Darrell Henderson, the guy they wanted to take some of that role, only 2%. So Darrell Henderson, honestly, folks, in shallow leagues, if you got a tough decision, I recommend trying to hold Darrell Henderson a little bit longer, but I don't blame you if you see something better out there. In medium-sized leagues, he's still probably a hold. In deeper leagues, he's a definite hold. Malcolm Brown needs to be owned in mid-size and deeper leagues. I think it's like we already said, Drake, if Todd Gurley goes down, Malcolm Brown's the dude. That's the bigger thing I take away. He may give you some flex value on bye weeks, but if Todd Gurley goes down, this is the Malcolm Brown show. So he needs to be owned anywhere possible. As far as Todd Gurley goes, I think we're just going to have to wait and see, Drake. The positive is 70% of the snaps. He's still running all the routes. It does seem like they're trying to lighten his load as a runner, only 44% of the rushing attempts. But do I feel comfortable predicting that that's going to hold, for the next 3 or 4 weeks? Not really, because like you said, he didn't get any work in the preseason. They may be trying to ease him in. So let's see how that part plays out. Super quickly, and we can move on from the Rams. Normal status quo with the receivers. All of them are on the field for 90% of the plays, all running routes 90% of the plays. Here's the problem. Jared Goff stunk again versus pressure. So he did not play well again against pressure this weekend. 25% completion rate, Drake, when under pressure. Man. Yeah, so he's struggling with that. And to be fair to him, a lot of times the pressure's right up the middle into his face. I haven't got to rewatch this whole game. But that's tough for any quarterback to handle. It's probably more of an offensive line thing. But here's the thing, Drake. Teams are slowly figuring out the Los Angeles Rams. It's just happening. It's a trend. It's over the last 8 games. Go look at it. Their offense is down.
Let's go to Detroit, where the Lions could lose a game as only the Lions could. Literally, they had the game won. They had a little dump-off pass to J.D. McKissick called that not only would have had a first down and clinched the game, but it would have scored a touchdown. Their dopey offensive coordinator calls a timeout that they probably didn't even need. The next play, they'd throw a low-percentage Hail Mary almost down the field. That's incomplete. They have to punt. Game goes to overtime, and it ends in a tie. So, just awful if you're the Lions. But if you want to look at their receivers and the tight end Hawkinson's a guy that needs to be owned. He should have been drafted in all your leagues. Guy's a stud. Play him every week. If you want to look at their wide receivers, I thought Kenny Golladay looked very good. Marvin Jones, not so much. And maybe Matt Stafford now, Dwayne, has some streamability.
Yeah, TJ Hawkinson should be owned in every format. We actually talked about this a few pods back that, he should be a part of everybody's draft plan if you're waiting on tight end, pairing him with a guy like Rudolph. So hopefully you did that. And now you're just sitting on a freaking gold mine because the guy looks uncoverable, to be honest. It's crazy. You don't see this with tight ends. Again, props to Matt Waldman. This was his highest graded tight end in 15, 13 years or whatever it's been since he started doing the RSP. This is his highest graded tight end ever. And wow, is it showing up right away. So played 71% of the snaps, 73% of the time that Stafford was dropping back to pass, he was on the field. That's a tad low, but Jesse James is going to be out there 60% of the snaps. But check this, Drake. Jesse James was in routes only 29% of the time. He's the blocker. So TJ Hawkinson is the guy getting the run out. The other thing about these receivers, Kenny Golladay played almost every snap, saw 20% of the targets. He's going to be fine. I see this being a balanced offense, Drake. You're going to see a lot of games where each of these guys is a 15 to 20% range. This week, Danny Amendola led the way with 27% of the targets. He was on the field only 52% of snaps, but 71% of the times Stafford was passing the ball, Danny Amendola was running around. Marvin Jones was kind of the odd man out here. That won't be every week, though. The guy's out there plenty. He's going to be on the field. I think this is honestly going to be a team, Drake, that when you take away overtime, I'm a little concerned about understanding who's going to be the guy that's left out each week. I don't think we're always going to know, because this weekend, if you shave off overtime, you got to take 10 attempts basically off of what Stafford did, which would put him around 35. I had him projected for 33 attempts per game based on Darrell Bevell and his history. And guess what? I'm going to stick by that looking at this game and the way that this game worked out. So if you're only getting 33 attempts and now you got, 3 guys trying to get 20% of it and 1 guy left out every week, there's going to be some down weeks in this passing game, so just be ready. But TJ Hawkinson, because the way tight ends work, he's a must-own. He should, like you said, he's a priority anywhere. Danny Amendola, if you're in a super deep league,
that's what I want to ask you about. Yeah, 13 targets.
He's a guy you can add, but here's what's going to happen. I believe now. Remember, Darrell Bevell has always loved to he schemes to get his slot receivers involved. You mentioned Doug Baldwin earlier; that was a Darrell Bevell thing, right? Even if you go back to Minnesota with Percy Harvin, Darrell Bevell was a big user of the slot even back then. So there's a history here. I think what we're going to see, though, Drake, is in a situation where if this team isn't behind or in a script that demands the pass, we could have a situation similar to Tennessee and Adam Humphries.
And Doug Baldwin and Percy Harvin are way more talented than Danny Amendola, just on pure athleticism.
Yes.
They're going to be able to break plays. He's not breaking anything 60 yards and going down the field.
Yes, and I do think that Stafford's going to have some streamability. You just got to be prepared. They're probably not going to throw the ball this much except when the situation calls for it. Just quickly hitting on, so Amendola in a deep league, to answer your question, sure. But again, he's going to be similar to Adam Humphries. If you're in a medium to small size league, I'm not prioritizing Danny Amendola. I don't see some scenario where all of a sudden, in 4 weeks, people are going, oh my God, Danny Amendola gets 10 targets every single week. I don't see it happening unless you told me that, every game played out where the Lions were losing, which I guess it's possible, but it's not like Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, and TJ Hawkinson are just going to let Danny Amendola lead the way every week. I think they're actually all good players, right? So quickly on here's the thing that sucks, Drake. Kerryon Johnson. While this staff figured out how to use their young tight end, they still do not understand what they have in Kerryon Johnson, and I don't know that they ever will. He only had 50% of the attempts. Ran routes on 41% of the dropbacks, 57% of the snaps. You got C.J. Anderson working in. You got Ty Johnson working in. You got to get J.D. McKissick on the field, Drake. You got to get J.D. McKissick some snaps.
Of course.
You got 4 freaking running backs getting into this game. You had 2 scenarios play out in this game. 1, Lions playing ahead. 1, Lions needing to, get into a 2-minute offense, and play in a situation to keep the game close. Neither one of those worked out as being good for Kerryon Johnson. Like I said, he's well below guys, for me now, like Josh Jacobs. I don't trust this staff, Drake, to get this fixed, and I hate it because Kerryon Johnson could be an elite player.
All right, let's go over to Buffalo. Let's put someone through a flaming table here because Devin Singletary had 70 yards, but here's the thing. Yes, he played a lot of snaps. He didn't get a carry until I think it was under 5 minutes to go in the third quarter. The entire first half, he didn't have a carry. Finished with 4 for 70. So I know everyone says how great the guy looks, but Dwayne, what's going on here in Buffalo? They still have Frank Gore kind of in the mix. I've got Frank Gore on a roster. I'm thinking of dropping the guy.
Yeah, so here's the situation. It's what you said. You look at you, Drake. Look at you. Dropping this knowledge. It's a game script thing. Now, I like Devin Singletary. There are positives here. He should be owned in all formats. He most likely is. But before you go think about sticking him into your lineup, listen to what Drake just said. The guy did not get the carries until late in the game. What were the Jets welcoming late in the game? Run the ball, Buffalo. We've got a lead. Run the ball. Run the ball. We don't want to give up another long bomb to John Brown. For God's sake, run the ball against us. And they let them run, but only 4 carries. And so what happens in a situation where the game's tighter, or heaven forbid, Buffalo's got the lead? You're going to see less Devin Singletary. Here's the positive, though. TJ Yeldon is dead. TJ Yeldon is gone. They trust Devin Singletary, Drake, as their pass receiving back. 82% of the time that Josh Allen dropped back to pass, Mr. Singletary was running a route. That is good news. 16% of targets. Honestly, this is better news in this backfield. That's the best news you could have gotten, because that's honestly going to be the best way to have a nice floor each week, because Josh Allen's going to take your damn rushing touchdowns. He did it this past weekend. He'll do it again every week. You have no clue if any one of these running backs can score a rushing touchdown each week. It will be a complete, not even, your odds aren't even as good as a coin flip. They're not. So the best thing you could have seen in Singletary is the guy to get the lock down, the passing role. Now, that gives him room to grow, Drake. That's what I like. So I think Singletary is going to grow in his role. Frank Gore, I do expect to be the lead back. He had 44% of the attempts in games where it's closer or the Bills are winning.
How about John Brown here? Here's a guy with almost 25% target share for the Buffalo Bills. They're taking super deep shots to him, over 15 yards, average depth of target. He is the wide receiver 1 in Buffalo. If you're in a shallow league, I wouldn't be surprised if people forgot about John Brown and he's out there. So take a look at him. He looks really good, and I think he's going to be a contributor all year long.
Yeah, he's a guy that I actually, told some folks last week if they were in a tight spot and they were wanting to pick up like Darren Waller. And it seems like every person that came to me with that question, like John Brown was one of the guys they could drop. And I was looking at their roster thinking, they were just tough situations. These are smaller and mid-sized leagues. I still think John Brown's going to be a bit of a roller coaster. To your point, he needs to be owned in every league. If you're playing in a deeper league, that plays a lot of positions, you're obviously going to have him out there each week. The 24% target share, 84% running routes, 84% of the time that Josh Allen's throwing. And here's what I got to say to the Bills Mafia. Josh Allen, he started off terrible, but I will say his accuracy late in the game did look better. So, he's slowly showing, improvement. Still doesn't look like he knows how to or understands how to read a defense until it's completely telegraphed to him before the snap. Anytime it changes after the snap, the guy's mind is like boggled, which is why I think you see him do better in second halves whenever he's trailing versus in the first half when a defense is still disguising everything. But we'll see how that plays out. But to your point, John Brown's a must-own. Cole Beasley, if you're in a deeper league, fine. If you're in a mid-size, a small league, I'm still not bothering with Cole Beasley. I just don't see the reason to deal with it in this particular offense.
I may not have guys like Evan Silva tweeting about me, but I know a thing or two about fantasy football here, Dwayne. Let's move it over to Cincinnati, where Joe Mixon's hurt. So Gio Bernard is a guy who's if he's on your waiver wire, I guess he becomes kind of one of your more priority ads for the week, because we don't know if and when Mr. Mixon is going to return. That is a bad offensive line, but the good thing with Mixon is he's going to be able to go out and catch some passes and salvage anything that he doesn't get on the ground. So what do we see in Cincinnati? Tyler Boyd, another solid day, getting tons of targets out there. And wait a minute, I thought, was there somebody on this show that was talking about John Ross? That was you, Dwayne. You talked about John Ross for like a year and a half now, and holy schmoly, this guy just blew up and had the day of days. If you had him in a DFS lineup, congratulations on your trip to the bank today. So John Ross, is he a guy we can actually pick up, or was that fool's gold?
Yes, John Ross is actually a guy that you can pick up. Right now, I would trust him to do what he did again over Marquise Brown. I'm not guaranteeing you that John Ross will stay healthy, but I can't guarantee you that about Marquise Brown either. John Ross is out running routes 82% of the time that Andy Dalton drops back. And as long as A.J. Green is out, which we don't know, is that 4 weeks? Is that 6 weeks? We still don't know. We haven't heard any sort of true timetable around A.J. Green. John Ross is one of the top 2 targets in this offense, and he and Andy Dalton are showing some mojo. Here's a thing to remember, folks. I wrote this note down. I do a lot around preseason. A thing that can often happen in preseason, and we talked about it on our last Hustle show before the season started, Drake. And if you remember, you said, hey, who's one guy nobody's owning? And yes, I did mention John Ross. And here's why. just because they weren't playing him. They were keeping him in bubble wrap. Now, obviously, the guy's been hurt, but think about Marquise Brown. Hadn't been playing. They were essentially got him a little bit involved late in the preseason, but you weren't hearing a lot about him. A lot of these guys that, are injured in the preseason, they just fall, in our minds, right? Because they're just not in the news cycle as much. So just remember that going forward. We knew that this was going to be an LA Rams 2.0. Obviously, they don't have quite the talent. But you saw them run exactly the same scheme as the Rams, and that means 3 receivers are on the field all the time, which was going to be good for John Ross even with A.J. Green. But while A.J. Green's out, yes, John Ross is a wide receiver 3. I am willing to put him into lineups. 24% of the targets, 169 air yards, Drake. 169.
That seems like a lot.
An average depth, it's a lot. An average depth of target of 14. He got to operate from the slot 37% of the time. John Brown he's getting schemed up, man, and they barely lost that game to the Seahawks. So they were competitive. To your point, Tyler Boyd's going to be fine. 20% of the targets, that's going to rotate. Some weeks it's going to be Ross with 20%. Boyd will be at 30%. That's going to rotate around whenever you get AJ Green back. If these other 2 guys are really going, I wouldn't expect AJ Green just to jump in and take off. They may choose to ease him back in if these 2 guys are playing well. So we'll have to see how that goes. Gio Bernard. Yeah, it sounds like Mixon could play this weekend, Drake. I haven't looked at the latest, like in the last few minutes, but it'll be just going to have to watch practice reports. But Gio Bernard needs to be, I guess the best way to say this, Gio Bernard and John Ross in shallow leagues, you'll have to decide. I'm talking 8-man type stuff because you're typically stacked. Unless you have a lot of starters, then you're going to want to think about these 2 guys and you have a deep, if you have a deep bench. But if you're in mid-size leagues, Ross and Gio must be rostered. Deep, obviously, in deeper leagues, they have to be rostered. And I am not afraid to put John Ross in my lineup as my wide receiver 3 next week. I'm more comfortable doing that than I am Marquise Brown.
Bengals are at home next week against the 49ers. Would you stream or recommend picking up Andy Dalton?
Yeah, I think he's a viable streaming option. We saw, Winston really struggle, but I think more of that was to do with the new offense that Winston's playing in, and they're just off to a rough start. But yeah, if you're in a pinch, there's so many quarterbacks this year, and a lot of people drafted 2. They probably don't need it. But if you're in a deep league, and if you're like me in some cases, you just drafted 1 guy, and now you're thinking about streaming the next. Yes, Dalton's in play. He should be in play for DFS for sure.
Yeah, I drafted Cam Newton, so hooray me! Great week 1. While you're talking about new offenses, let's go to Big D, where Kellen Moore and that new offense just put a whooping on the Giants. Dak Prescott, 25 of 32 for 405 yards and 4 touchdowns as the Cowboys rolled 35-17 over the G-Men. Dwayne, you're a Cowboys fan. You had to be happy with this performance, and this looked like a whole new team out there.
Yeah, 9.3 ADOT for Dak Prescott, average depth of target. He was elite on his deep ball, connected on 4 of 5 for like 160 of his yards, spreading the ball around, just a much more vertical type of offense is what we're seeing under Kellen Moore. Dak Prescott looks extremely comfortable, man. Drake making very quick decisions, something that I've worried about with Prescott in the past. Average time to throw in this game, 2.25 seconds. That's getting the ball out hot. Now, part of that is the Giants can't cover anyone. Like, anytime they went man, it was over. It was just over. Randall Cobb could have had 7 or 8 catches. He had 3 called back due to penalty, right? Michael Gallup went off for 150-plus yards.
That's a guy we got to talk about. I'm sure he's available in a lot of medium and smaller leagues.
Yeah,
would you recommend picking him up?
Yeah, everybody got theirs. If you're in a smaller league, Gallup's going to be on the fringe. If you're in a mid-sized league or deeper league, he's a must-own. He should be a guy that shouldn't be sitting on the waiver wire out there. Amari Cooper is the clear 1A. If you drafted him, folks, and you didn't get scared off by his foot injury, and I'll admit later in the preseason, I let my foot off the gas. Early in the preseason, I was drafting Amari Cooper at the end of the second round turn. He was my 3-1 pick in so many drafts, and I was pounding the table for, look, this guy's being undervalued. He could finish as a top 6 receiver in this offense. All they need to do is actually pass the ball in the second half instead of going into a shell, which Kellen Moore had told us he was going to do, and that's exactly what we saw, Drake. That was the difference. This team got ahead, and they didn't quit. Kellen Moore just kept freaking just punching the Giants in the gut with the passing game. I mean, and look what it did for Amari. 28% of the targets. Dude's going to be – he's a wide receiver one, Drake. He's a wide receiver one, and his foot looks fine. But Michael Gallup, I see him as being a potential flex, wide receiver 3 the rest of the way. I do think you'll have some bumpy days because I don't think that everybody can get fed. So I think what's going to happen is Cobb is going to have some days that are going to be better than Gallup. But I would lean more Gallup than Cobb, based on the youth and less injury risk.
Zeke and Tony Pollard, the exact same amount of carries here. So Pollard got a little run. I think they're working Zeke back into the fold, but you should have no worries if you draft Ezekiel Elliott. What if you have Tony Pollard out there? You just kind of hold him right now?
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal. You're holding one of the top handcuffs in the league. Don't worry about what he can do for you right now. If Zeke goes down, Tony Pollard could win you your league.
Yep.
That's what you have to remember with Tony Pollard. Don't get so caught up into what he did this week or what his future role is going to be. Here, what I am going to say, 45% of the time Dak dropped back to pass despite Zeke only playing 54% of the snaps. 45% of the time it was Zeke. And that's where I thought Pollard might take a little bit more. So Zeke basically, he did the same thing that we talked about earlier. He turned to Pollard and said, "Hey, bruh, hold my beer."
Cowboys get the Redskins this week, so fire them up because they're going to rock and roll again in week 2. Let's go to Indianapolis, where the Colts, I think a lot of people thought, Andrew Luck's gone. They're going to look like the dumpster fire they were a few years ago when he was out. They actually looked pretty good. 21 of 27 for Jacoby Brissett. T.Y. Hilton got his. What do we see here in Indianapolis? Marlon Mack is just a 0 in the passing game, but he sure as hell did it on the ground this week.
So here's the thing I'm going to say. Marlon Mack is going to get RB1 work. We didn't know for sure what was going to happen, but it's happening. One of the things that we talked about on our show is I expected this to actually create even more rushing attempts because I felt they were going to turn Jacoby Brissett into a bus driver, and that's exactly what they did, Drake. Despite trailing almost every single drive that they had the ball, Jacoby Brissett only attempted 27 passes. That is bad for these receivers. If T.Y. Hilton didn't see 33% of the targets, we would be singing a much different tune. I think T.Y. Hilton's there's going to be much more fluctuation with him than what this stat line today showed. In fact, if I was in a league where I drafted T.Y. Hilton in the 3rd round and I can move him now for another viable, upside kind of play, I would be willing to do that because I don't see T.Y. Hilton getting 30-35% of the target. I see it being around 22-24%. You still got Paris Campbell coming on. Yeah, Funchess is hurt, but they like Deion Kane. You still have Eric Ebron. You still have Jack Doyle. You got Nyheim Hines. Marlon Mack, here's the other thing, Drake. 63% of the time that Jacoby Brissett dropped back to pass, he was running routes, so he's going to get his catches. It's coming. Just wait.
Devin Funchess to IR, by the way.
Okay, yeah, that's hot off the press. So that makes Deion Kane worth a flyer in deep leagues. But again, I don't trust this passing attack in medium leagues, small leagues. I'm not worried about Deion Kane. I'm still not worried about Paris Campbell. I'm going to keep an eye on it, watch how it works out. T.Y. Hilton is basically the only guy, other than Marlon Mack that I would feel comfortable starting right now. Ebron only played 40% of the snaps, Drake, only in routes for 50% of the time. That's a recipe for disaster. So I'm concerned about Ebron, especially if some of these younger pass catchers come on. Marlon Mack, though, you're looking really good. He's going to have his 4 and 5 catch weeks. Nyheim Hines is getting the designed passing plays, meaning down the field, right? So the other day, though, Nyheim Hines was the guy getting some of the screen work and stuff like that. It was very specific kind of stuff. But I'm overall encouraged because he wasn't taking all the passing down work, which we thought he might do.
If you listen to this new DFS show I do called Eat the Chalk, and I suggest that you do, the Eat the Chalk podcast, I said my play of the week was Carson Wentz stacked with Deshaun Jackson. They're going to hit a big play. It's money in the bank.
Homer.
Yeah, right. How many times did it happen? Twice. I'm a homer because I watch the team and I know what the hell I'm talking about with these guys. If I know anything, I can tell you about Eagles football. And they hit it twice. Deshaun Jackson opens up that offense. Didn't really see it with Ertz and Goddard underneath, but he adds such a critical element that this team didn't have last year. Wentz looked awful in the first half. The whole offense was sleepwalking. But Dwayne, we want to talk about the running backs here as we cruise through the Eagles. Miles Sanders looked great. Had a touchdown called back. Pass protection, he was spot on. But god damn, Doug Peterson, enough with the Darren Sproles all the time.
Yeah, we talked about this. I remember people laughing, oh, Darren Sproles ain't going to play as soon as he signed, and we saw this as a concern because it's the history. And then, again, they didn't just play 3 guys, Drake. Corey Clement even got out there a little bit. So this is a situation right now you can't start any of these guys. Miles Sanders is the guy to own. So if you invested a 6th-round draft pick, 7th-round, 5th-round draft pick, depending on what time of the year you drafted, you just have to hold him. Darren Sproles is not worth owning. I don't even want him in a deeper league. Unless I'm just thinking somebody, unless I just got to plug in because I got 4 guys hurt and literally no one's available. But Jordan Howard, you can't trust at this point. 23% of the snaps, 20% of the rushing attempts. Miles Sanders saw the most work, 49% of the snaps, 33% of the rushing attempts, 39% of the routes per drop back. I'm hoping that they want Miles Sanders to take over the backfield. I did watch the game. I didn't think he looked as good as you thought. I thought actually he kind of did what we're used to, which is Miles being Miles and not taking what's in front of him. A couple times he ran himself out of what would have been an easy gain. I
think the narrative would be much different if that touchdown wasn't called back.
Maybe, but here's the problem. I mean, he does the same thing over and over. He will give you the one big play, and unfortunately for him, it got called back. That's his problem. He's that kind of runner. He thinks he's Saquon Barkley, and he's not. That he's not good enough to do those things, and that's what's hurting him. And honestly, if he would, I do think he can learn it though, Drake. If he can just start to take the gains that are in front of him and be less risky and just then take the big plays when they're there, I do believe he can still turn into an RB1 because this is an elite offense. This offense is going to hum. To your point about Deshaun Jackson, he should be owned in every format. Most likely already is owned. But man, Drake, only out there for 69% of the snaps, but running routes on 75% of the time, 23% target share. But talk about making some stuff count. 140 air yards. That's 42% of the team's air yards went through Deshaun Jackson. And you know what? We've heard all preseason, Drake, and you've touted it, is that Carson Wentz and he have a connection, and we definitely saw it. Not worried about Zach Ertz. He's out there playing plenty of snaps, still saw 18% of the targets. He's still going to have his 25-30% weeks. Dallas Goedert, if you're holding him, the only reason is you're considering him to be the handcuff of Zach Ertz. He's not going to have value to you. You're never going to be able to start him otherwise. Only played 55% of the snaps, only ran routes on 39% of the pass plays. That, folks, is not startable. So if you're in a shallow league, unless you're holding a guy, where you just think, hey, he's my lottery ticket, you can drop Dallas Goedert. You can slap me in the face next week when Zach Ertz goes down, because I am clarifying. If that happens, Goddard will be a tight end 1. Oh, yeah. So if you feel like you got to hold him for that, you can. But, man, it's hard, Drake, when you probably have Darren Waller. You might have T.J. Hawkinson out there if you're in a shallow league. I can't hold Goddard over those guys. In medium-sized leagues, he's a borderline cut. In deep leagues, he's a guy you hold. The only reason you're keeping Dallas Goedert is he's basically like, instead of, your running back handcuff, he's your tight end handcuff. And you think that he wins your league if for some reason Zach Ertz goes down. Other than that, he ain't going to do anything. In
Tampa Bay, Jameis Winston is who we thought he was. He sucks. That was abysmal. 20 of 36 for a $194, a touchdown and 3 picks. We definitely touted him here on the show. I know I started him in a league or two. Whew, Dwayne,
I'm not going to panic. Here's the deal. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, there's so many quarterbacks. If you're in a deeper league, though, I'd have to see the list of who's out there. It's just tough, Drake. He still has it's a brand new install of an offense, so he's learning again. He's got O.J. Howard, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. Has that changed?
No.
Did that change?
I do want to throw this caveat in here while we're quickly talking about his weapons. I mentioned at one point he loves Cameron Brate. Brate had 2 touchdowns called back this week on the O.J. Howard parade. But go on.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. I'm fine with the O.J. Howard parade because Cameron Brate's never getting on the field. 80% of the snaps, O.J. Howard. O.J. Howard's going to be fine. Here is my worry with O.J. Howard. 55% routes ran despite 80% of the snaps. Routes ran per drop back, 55%. Why? Because their offensive line is freaking terrible. and he's having to block a lot. And that's against the 49ers, who they have a decent front seven. It's underrated, really. They've put a lot of picks into that front seven. So we're going to have to monitor that and see how that goes. I've had people tell me, OJ Howard, we're dropping. Hell no. Do not drop OJ Howard. If someone does drop OJ Howard, you go pick him up. The guy is an elite talent. So we're going to have to see what happens with the blocking. That does worry me a little bit, but he's still one of the top 3 options on the team. Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, it was just spread out, Drake. And here's the running back. The running back is a running back by committee times 3. Your guy, I'll let you say it. How do you say his last name? Ogunbowale?
Ogunbowale, yeah. I mean, he got a lot of the passing work. Ronald Jones, a guy we've talked up since Arians took over, 13 for 75. I just read Arians said that today Barber's still the starter. They kind of want to do this hot hand thing, but if Ogunbowale, whatever the guy's name is.
Here's the point, 38%, 36%, and 32%. You don't want any of this. It's a 3-way split. You don't want anything to do with this backfield. Anything we said about Ronald Jones, just erase it from your memory. If you're in a medium-sized league, fine, leave him on your bench. If you're in a deep league, you need to hold him. He needs to be on your bench. If you're in a shallow league, don't go pick up Ronald Jones. He had 50% of the attempts, but like you said, it's going to be a hot hand. He had 13 carries, and he looked pretty good. He did. But I just don't see a situation where in this backfield, Drake, you kind of need to be the 1A and the 1B to have value. Even if you get this down to a 2-man backfield, which I don't see happening. I think they're going to stick with this 3-man nasty thing. It's going to be tough to have value.
And you can't keep, I know because I have Ogunbowale on a couple of teams, 4 or 5 for 33 yards. He's never going to run the rock. I mean, you're never going to put this guy in your lineup or feel good about it.
He's a deep league only kind of thing. I mean, here's the thing I like about him. They do trust him in passing, which is the hardest thing to do, right? They trust him to do what he needs to do as a receiver. They trust him to make blocks. That means he has a chance for his role to grow. So Ogunbowale, if you owned him in a deeper league, I'm not saying he's uncuttable because he is, but he's not a guy you just go rush to cut unless the right thing is there. He's the guy that, at least could potentially grow into more. We'll see how it goes.
If you're in New York and you can catch a pass and play wide receiver, go knock on the door of MetLife Stadium because they're looking for wide receivers this week. Cody Latimer could be a name you see jumping off the wire. That's because Sterling Shepard has a concussion. We still have Golden Tate out, suspended. Latimer, for the Giants this week, 8 targets, caught 3 of them for 74 yards. The real winner in all this is Evan Ingram, who just went nuclear with 11 catches for $116 and a touchdown. He's really the man to own. Saquon is awesome. They still kept Eli in until the end when Daniel Jones got a little mop-up duty. Giants are a bad team. It's a really bad offense. They're going to be playing from behind. They're going to throw the ball a lot. Any chance you're going to take a long look at Cody Latimer this week?
No, I doubt it. In the deepest of deep leagues, where there's literally nothing on the wire, then in that case I might. Here's the nice thing for Latimer, really, if anybody's thinking about him, he's really a DFS punt play. 149 air yards. He's the guy that's stretching out the field. Really the only 2 guys worth owning in this offense right now in shallow leagues and medium type leagues are Evan Ingram and Saquon Barkley. I mean, Sterling Shepard you can hold him, in a medium format. I'm fine with cutting Sterling Shepard in a shallow format. If there are other things available, a nice player, Drake, but I don't see where, this offense is really going to create much for him. Saquon Barkley and Evan Ingram are the 2 lead guys. If you drafted Evan Ingram, until Golden Tate gets back, and as long as Sterling Shepard's banged up, he's going to easily be, a top 6 tight end each week just on the volume. 29% of targets went his way this past week. The Giants, what we will say is they fixed their offensive line. Yeah. Evan Ingram doesn't have to worry about staying back and blocking like OJ Howard, running routes on 82% of his snaps.
I almost threw a remote through the TV on Sunday when I saw Dontrell freaking Hilliard vulture a touchdown from Nick Chubb. So Nick Chubb, my first-round pick in numerous leagues, he ran for 74 yards. He got 16 carries. Game script got all out of whack for the Browns, who just got lambasted by the Tennessee Titans. A lot of finger pointing can go around here. You can look at the defense. You can look at Mayfield, who is a turnover machine. He really only had eyes for Odell Beckham. Njoku found the end zone a little bit. Your view on the Cleveland Browns here, who Delaney Walker, as I said earlier, they are who we thought they were, channeling his inner Dennis Green.
Yeah, go talk to your Nick Chubb owner and buy if you can. Now, he probably invested a high pick, or she invested a high pick. But Nick Chubb is a player that I still, man, the underlying metrics here are great. 70% of the snaps, 85% of the rushing attempts. And Drake never did this last year, running routes on 55% of the dropbacks. That's an improvement for him. So Nick Chubb, absolutely still a must-own. He's going to get his in this offense. Dontrell Hilliard had one carry. Unfortunately, it was the one carry that was a touchdown. Talk about fluky.
And now he's
right?
banged up with a concussion. So good.
Yeah, talk about fluky.
Yeah.
And so that's what got Dearness Johnson in, was Dontrell Hilliard, being banged up. But Nick Chubb's fine, guys. Nick Chubb, go buy. Odell Beckham Jr., 100% of the snaps. Jarvis Landry, 100% of the snaps. Odell Beckham Jr., 29% of the targets. Landry, 18%. I will say Rashard Higgins was looking pretty salty before he got hurt. He hurt his ankle, I believe, in the game. And, then it was Damian Ratley coming in. And Njoku's kind of in a similar situation as, our boy O.J. Howard. He's staying back to block some, 16% of the targets, 70% of the routes per drop back by Baker Mayfield. But Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb, all still fine at where you drafted them. They're just guys that, like you said, the game script got a little crazy. Things went haywire. Baker had a bad day. It's going to happen. But these guys should all be owned. If you can go lift someone like Jarvis Landry or Nick Chubb, if somebody's just for whatever reason is just that impatient, go do it.
Next few teams, maybe we can cruise through here. Atlanta, just a bad day all around for the Falcons. There'll be better days ahead for Matt Ryan, who was awful week 1 a year ago and still ended up being a top quarterback in fantasy a year ago. Don't get crazy with Devonta Freeman. I still think he's going to come through, although, Dwayne, he split a lot of work with Ito Smith. Was that game script? I mean, I thought we were saying here Devonta Freeman is a pass catcher. Why is Ito Smith getting all this work?
Yeah, this is one to watch. Talk about, a surprise. I mean, you watch all the preseason games, you listen to everything that the coaches are saying. I mean, you look at the history of Devonta Freeman, everything adds up to Freeman being the dude. 49% of the snaps versus 51% for Ito Smith. Freeman did have a fumble that seemed to kind of upset the coaches, so I think that tilted things a little bit to Ito Smith. To your point, they were trailing by a healthy margin in this game. So part of it could have been just saying, let's just keep Freeman healthy, but we don't know for sure. Freeman, 47% of the rushes, 35% for Ito Smith, 38% of the routes per dropback, 44% for Ito Smith. Now, he did out-carry him, like I said, 47-35, and he out-targeted Ito 9% to 2%. The thing I do like about Freeman is he was averaging his average depth of target, Drake, 3.5 yards. That is really good and usually correlates to really good success in the passing game if he consistently can stay around that number. I like what we're seeing there. I'm going to hold to the fact that I still believe Freeman is 70% of this workload, and I'm going to chalk it up to the fumble, wanting to protect him from injury, the game script, all those things. But if we see this again next week and it's a tighter game, it'll be a time to sound the alarm bells. All
of America wanted to talk about how Cliff Kingsbury was going to rejuvenate the NFL and show us things we've never seen before. And for most of the game, it was kind of a snooze fest. They looked pretty bad. They did get the overtime to help pad some stats. What did you think of Kyler Murray in his NFL debut? Boy, he looks so just, effortless, flinging that ball out of his wrist down the field. Not much to say from the wide receivers outside of Larry Fitzgerald is amazing, and he's still Larry Fitzgerald. And Keyshawn Johnson, 10 targets. So maybe somebody to look at in a deeper league.
Yeah, so Murray looked like crap for 3 quarters and looked good for 2. I haven't had a chance to re-watch this fully, Drake, but what I suspect is Detroit got comfortable, was playing from ahead, just started probably playing a lot of man under, 2 over the top. Same thing we saw happen in the bowl game when Ohio State was confusing him and putting pressure on Kyler Murray. He looked terrible, just like he looked in this first half whenever the Lions were disguising things and keeping things, mixed up, making things look one way before snap, a different way after the snap. Murray was literally lost. Now, does the ball come off of his hand well? Yep. Does he know how to manipulate a pocket? Nope. If he's in a situation where a defense keeps the hammer down on him, this offense was literally saved by the fourth quarter and overtime. Otherwise, you would have not been happy with any outcome from any player on this offense. So the good news is they're paced, Drake. 2.68 plays per minute, by far the top in the league, for this first Sunday. By far. So the pace was there. You got to remember overtime helped. My guess is it's a very balanced offense, which is what we saw. Fitzgerald 20%, Christian Kirk 19%, Keyshawn Johnson 19%, 11, 10, and 10. Even Demir Byrd had 7 targets. David Johnson had 7 targets. So you get into a situation where that's 4 quarters. You still have the plays per minute and they got a full overtime because that game ended in a tie, right? Mm-hmm. So even in 4 quarters, though, you're still looking at the bottom is 65 attempts in a game for this offense, and likely 60% of them are going to be passes. So I still think that can support Drake, 7 to 8 targets to each one of those guys per week. Every once in a while, you'll have one guy break out over the others, but I see it being a pretty balanced attack. If you're in a super deep league, Demir Byrd is a guy that, and I'm talking the super deepest of the super deepest. He's a guy you can pick up. Don't bail on Christian Kirk. It just didn't work out, for him this week, but he's heavily involved in the game plan. Keyshawn Johnson needs to be owned in deep leagues, mid-sized leagues. He could be borderline depending on what you're talking about. Shallow leagues, there's no point in bothering with Keyshawn Johnson yet.
If you own Cam Newton like I do, you probably lost this week, so I'm with you. Crack a beer. All right, Cam Newton, 25 of 38 for 239 and a pick. Didn't run at all. Usually Cam helps you out and saves you with his work with his legs. That didn't happen this week. He ran for -2 yards, I believe it was. Christian McCaffrey, though, if you have him, he is a stud with a capital S. DJ Moore is DJ Moore. He's exactly what we thought he was going to be. Curtis Samuel, I think there's a buying opportunity, Dwayne. If you look at his percentage of snaps and the routes that he ran, I think he's going to be okay as we go throughout the season. There could be some owners who kind of sour on him. Maybe he gets dropped in a shallow league. Who knows? That's a guy I'd want to get on my side. Just a tough watch this Carolina offense because Cam Newton just doesn't look like himself.
Yeah, but passing the ball, Cam looks fine, which is a positive because people forget because he didn't get his rushing yards. People just forgot about being worried about his shoulder. And so Cam Newton didn't look bad throwing the ball. He looked pretty good.
Pushed the ball down the field like he used to.
But he didn't last year. They changed the offense last year, Drake. This offense, this is not a vertical offense. Norv Turner turned this into a horizontal offense last year. So this is old news. If we were expecting Cam Newton to have an 8 out of 10, then you just didn't watch the games last year. His 8 out last year was around 7 to 8 every game. So it's fine.
But isn't that what he does best when we talk about Cam Newton? He's not a very accurate thrower. So, he does best pushing the ball down the field when he can unleash that rifle.
I think that's just a myth. I think it depends on the offense that you're in. The way this offense is built, based on the weapons they have, I think they're running it the perfect way. And I think that you're going to see Curtis Samuel still get his. If someone drops him in your league, even in a shallow league, I would still find a way to get Curtis Samuel on my roster. It probably won't be long because it's a Thursday night game, and Greg Olson's back is acting up. He may not even be able to play. And if that happens, Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore will have big games. DJ Moore, a guy we touted quite often through the preseason, 26% of the targets. That's 10 of them. He worked underneath, 10.4 intermediate. The thing with Curtis Samuel, I do want to see him get down the field more, but I'm not really worried about it with Cam. I just think they're trying to protect Cam's shoulder, plus he's got the issue with his legs. I think this is something that we'll see work itself out as the season goes, but I'm honestly not worried about it because they ran this offense this way last year, even before Cam hurt his shoulder. And it was starting to click towards the middle of the season when they finally had DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel on the field. And this is the kind of offense they ran. And Christian McCaffrey underneath, oh my goodness. There's still upside for the Panthers. What really hurt us is what you said, Drake. The thing that makes us even think about Cam Newton is that we didn't get the rushing yards. We didn't get a rushing touchdown. And so we need his leg to get healthy. We need his foot, to get healthy. So let's see what happens over the next couple of weeks, but I'm not in a panic mode with Cam Newton. I'm going to keep on chugging.
Let's go to Jacksonville, where if you have any money in Scott Fishbowl in your waiver budget still, it's all going to go to Gardner Minshew to get a high-level backup quarterback here. This kid I guess his college coach came out and he was very upset that I think he went in the 6th round. He thought he should have been higher or whatever. Boy, he looks really good. 22 of 25, couple of touchdowns. He gets the Texans in week 2, who you can definitely move the ball on, as we saw last night. This kid looks legit.
Yeah, let's see when a team has a week to game plan, but I'm with you. He looked good. What I liked that I saw from him was the fact that he played really good under pressure. So they tried to blitz him. They tried to do some things to hurt him. You know what he did? He burned them for 2 touchdowns when they blitzed him, Drake. You don't normally see that out of rookie quarterbacks. So maybe his college coach is onto something. The guy seems to have a little bit of moxie about him. He operated, handled himself like a professional. So honestly, this week, had he not played that well, think what a downgrade this would be for all this offense. I'm still saying, hey, be on alert. Let's see what happens here. But I didn't see much of a fall off from what we saw with Foles from the time Minshew came in. So if you're a dynasty owner, he's a guy that you should also, obviously, he needs to be on your radar. If you're in a super deep league where all the quarterbacks are taking, you're thinking about it like Scott Fishbowl. Otherwise, he's not a guy you're going to mess with. Here's what I'm going to say. This offense runs through Leonard Fournette and Dede Westbrook. Chris Conley and DJ Chark both got a little bit of love this week. That's going to help Westbrook. If you're in a deep league, Conley and Chark are worth owning. If you're in a medium-sized league, I do not really care about Conley or Chark. If I'm in a shallow league, I don't care about those guys. This is a Fournette, Dede Westbrook offense. Westbrook was in route 94%. The next closest guy was 81. Chark was at a 75. So Dede Westbrook will be the main guy still. This past week, he ended up getting targeted by Chris Conley at 7 versus his 5. But I still feel very good about Dede Westbrook where he sets. Fournette, man, 69% routes ran per dropback. How about that, Drake?
69.
See that
Shout out to all the Ronnie the limo driver fans out there.
Yeah, you didn't used to see that with Fournette. So that's a positive thing. We do need Minshew to be able to stabilize the offense. So there's still a little bit of an alert here with this offense. But from a workload standpoint, those two guys, they look great.
All right, let's swing it over to the L.A. Chargers, where Austin Eckler looked like a stud. You were talking all offseason how he was a guy you were heavily targeting, and I think it was rounds 4 or 5. If you got him, wowza, he is going to dominate touches in this Chargers offense until Melvin Gordon comes back. And I said it online, even if Melvin Gordon comes back, Austin Eckler is not going away. He's still going to have his role. And boy, if I'm Melvin Gordon, I'm thinking about showing up sooner than later.
Yeah, I mean, he was the guy that in 12-man leagues with, double flex positions, I was targeting in the early 6th round where I could get him and using him as part of a strategy to start my season with, and then have a guy like Miles Sanders that hopefully would take over by the time Melvin Gordon comes back. But I'm with you. I mean, if he keeps playing this well, I still think Melvin Gordon would become the lead back, but I think we wouldn't see the Melvin Gordon we're used to. Here's the other thing with Eckler, and we talked about this in the preseason. Preseason does matter, folks, in certain situations. We said Austin Eckler was going to dominate the touches here over Justin Jackson. Had a lot of people coming at us, and I like Justin Jackson. But had a lot of people go, oh, man, Justin Jackson's going to outcarry him. No, he's not. Sorry. Not happening. 57% of the attempts to Austin Eckler, 69% of the routes per dropback, Austin Eckler. Justin Jackson, still a guy that you want to own. It's not that we hate Justin Jackson, but only 25% of the snaps, Drake. So this is Austin Eckler's backfield. I expect that to be more around like a 65-35. The way the game worked out at the end, especially with the Chargers going down the field to win it in overtime. But Eckler, man, he's a poor man's Christian McCaffrey. That's what the guy is right here. Going to catch passes, going to get enough running work to keep you in games. And, man, he has a nose for the end zone, Drake. Don't worry about Hunter Henry. On the field plenty, not having to block, only 12% targets, but his underlying work is there. Keenan Allen, we've talked about it all offseason, Drake. I've talked about him. He's just a guy you can't cover, and if you got a guy you can't cover and you have a veteran quarterback, they're just going to find him. Keenan Allen people don't know what to do with him. Mike Williams got dinged up in this game, so only played 64% of the snaps. Didn't look all that great. Travis Benjamin and Dontrell Inman saw a little bit more work. Benjamin is the 3 here. So Mike Williams just going to have to hold and wait and see, but be patient with Hunter Henry. Justin Jackson in a shallow type format, depending on your running back situation, could be a drop. But if you're in a mid-size or deeper league, you need to be put the hold on Justin Jackson.
In Houston, Duke Johnson, 9 rushes for 57 yards, had 5 targets, caught 4 of them for 33. And maybe the story here for a waiver wire perspective is Carlos Hyde, who looked okay, I guess. 10 rushes, 83 yards. He's out there. He's getting work. He's going to be a factor in this offense, whether we like it or not, no matter how we feel about Carlos Hyde. So I think there's some medium-sized leagues out there because of, around your draft day, people thought he was going to get cut. You didn't know where he was going to be. Carlos Hyde could be available on a lot of wires.
He's available quite a bit. I saw him get cut in a ton of deep leagues on the first waiver wire run, right? Because you got to remember, that's whenever he was he had been released. The news cycle hadn't even hit that he was going to be with the Texans. Even then, nobody knew what his role was going to be. So he's going to be available in a ton of places. You need to own him in a deep league. In a medium-sized league, it just depends on who you have. I'm still not super excited about it. In a shallow league, forget it. Carlos Hyde doesn't need to be owned unless you're worried about him being your Duke Johnson handcuff. And you're going to need a deeper, tight bench to even be able to stomach that because, you're not going to want to drop anybody worth anything for him. The bigger news here is this downgrades Duke Johnson. I was thinking, 55%, 45%. I kept him at 45%, but thought he had an upside of 55% of the carries, which he's right at that. But Hyde was on the field just a little bit too much, for my liking, Drake. It's about 10% off of where I thought it would be. So I'm going to want to monitor this through next week. But it just makes Duke Johnson still a nice flex play. But I'm not as comfortable with him as I thought I would be after week 1.
Dalvin Cook is an MFing monster. That guy running outside zone is a killer. 21 rushes, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. Wow. He looked damn good. He looked like the guy I drafted in the first round of my home league a year ago because I knew he would be this good in this Kubiak system now. Whew. It's all there on the
We've
table.
talked about it all offseason.
And
so people that are listening have been drafting him. I hope you own him. I traded for him in the offseason in Dynasty. I own him everywhere I can in redraft, so I'm super excited about Cook. And just wait. This team only ran 49 plays because they didn't have to run plays because the Falcons came out and laid a freaking huge egg. And this is a good defense, so they're going to be able to do this to teams at a time. But this is the extreme opposite of what we saw, with the Cardinals. 1.65 plays per minute, Drake. That's really, really slow, but they led. So I don't expect it to be that extreme every week. So you're going to get weeks where you're going to get 65 plays, and then you get your 55, 65% of those going to Dalvin Cook. Oh my goodness, you thought this week was nice? I'm telling you folks, if you own Dalvin Cook, you have a 200-yard week coming. It's coming. The guy, honestly, I don't know that any runner looked better this weekend. No. Just he looked like he was on another plane. It was like, hey, guy, nice to see you. Going to run by you now. What's up?
We'll see this week when they play the Packers.
Yeah, let's see what happens. So Alexander Mattison is a must-own, even in medium-sized leagues, must-own in deep leagues. He is the handcuff, and, man, he also looked good, Drake, in this scheme. So he had 9 attempts to 21 for Dalvin. So he's basically taking Latavius Murray's role. We're going to see 125, 135 carries out of this guy. Could get a little bit more work in the passing game. All right, folks freaking out about the Minnesota pass catchers. You just can't. They threw the ball 10 times because we've got an extremely crazy game script here where they just didn't have to do anything. They literally, freaking Kirk Cousins was like a damn chicken sitting on an egg. Just, that was the football. He's just back there just sitting on it, trying to run the clock down, and snap the ball at the last second. But, from a standpoint, one thing I do have concern because we talked a lot about Kyle Rudolph, 100% of the snaps. That's a good thing. Routes per dropback, 64%. Again, very small sample size, so I don't know what to make of it. I did notice twice on play action, he stayed in to block, and it was just Diggs and Thielen in the route, and then Cook floating out into the flat. And that is a play design that you will see in this offense. If it's not the tight end, they will use the running back too, and so some of those went to Dalvin Cook. But I still feel okay about Kyle Rudolph. If you're in a medium league, and you can get Darren Waller or you can get TJ Hawkinson and you want to move on, it's fine. I'm not going to blame you. If you're in a deeper league, you got to hold on Kyle Rudolph. I'm holding on to him, in all the formats. I got to see, another week, just not enough here. Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, both were fine. Stephon Diggs only played 60% of the snaps, Drake, but 100% of the times Kirk Cousins dropped back to pass, Diggs was in a route. He's got a hamstring issue, so they were saving him on some of the running downs.
Let's go to Denver, where Cortland Sutton looks like the man. Caught 7 of 8 targets for $120 against the Raiders last night. Everybody else was kind of a blah night. Even in the running game, Lindsey did nothing, 11 times for 43 yards. Freeman, who a lot of people had high hopes for, he didn't really do much. Emmanuel Sanders caught a touchdown. Joe Flacco's Joe Flacco. This is what you're going to get with his kind of offense. I don't know. There's not a whole lot to say about the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, there's not a ton. What I will say is it's Rich Scangarello, so there's some promise here with the scheme. It's still new. There's things they're working in. I'm with you on Flacco. It's kind of like, it hurts you. But he did get the ball outside to his wide receivers. He got it to Manny Sanders enough. He got it to Cortland Sutton enough to make them viable. So I think if you own either one of those two guys, that was about as good of an outcome, honestly, that you could expect in week one. Sanders got the touchdown. Cortland Sutton had whatever it was, the 10 or 11 targets, had over 100 yards. I couldn't have hoped for those two guys together in the same game to get more. Mm-hmm. So I think you should just be happy with it. To your point around the backfield, it's a true split. We've been talking about it. Both guys are getting work. I do expect, that this is something that will get better. And I think both of those runners can have value. If you're in a super shallow type league and you want to release Royce Freeman, I get it. In a medium-sized league, that's more questionable. In deeper leagues, you should still be holding Royce Freeman. Obviously, you're not going to get rid of Phillip Lindsay. Still looks really good, but he's just having to share the backfield.
If you're looking for an upside wide receiver out there, look no further than the ageless Ted Ginn. The former Buckeye caught all 7 of his targets for 101 yards last night. Jared Cook as a tight end, he disappointed, only had 37 yards on 2 catches. Traquan Smith did catch a touchdown, but he only had 2 targets. Michael Thomas is Michael Thomas. He's a beast, and Kamara is, one of the top 3 players in all of fantasy football. That's kind of the Saints in a nutshell, if you wouldn't say, Dwayne.
Yeah, nothing to really talk about. It's the Saints offense. We've covered it multiple times. It looked exactly the way we thought. Jared Cook will be fine. We didn't pump him up as being a guy that we thought was going to see 22, 23% of the targets. You heard Booger McFarland last night, no relation. Just that I know of. Somewhere along the way, we probably are related. But, you heard him, Drew Brees loves to throw to the tight end the most in the whole world, everybody. Well, when he had Jimmy Graham in his prime, since then, not so much, Booger. But I do like Jared Cook, so I still think he's going to be fine. But yeah, to your point, this is just the Saints offense.
Mm-hmm. Miami, do we have to say anything about the Dolphins?
No. Can we just move on? I told people don't draft them. Forget about it. And, with Kalen Ballage and with Kenyon Drake splitting time and this is the worst of all worst, guys. I don't see this team winning a game, Drake. I'm not joking. I haven't looked at their full schedule. I just don't see how they win a game. So let's just move on.
Watch them beat the Patriots this weekend. All right, last 2 teams. The Thursday nighter was Bears-Packers. What did you see from these 2 squads? We'll combine them here.
Yeah, just super quick. The Packers offense is still growing. It's still growing. Aaron Rodgers made a few great plays on his own. Here's what I'm going to say. Aaron Jones, it was a terrible game script for him, but I liked what I saw. A lot of people, oh my God, Aaron Jones is a bust, blah, blah, blah. It's funny. Same people are saying, and I love David Montgomery. I'm like, you people just have bias based on who you like. Seriously. But Aaron Jones, 61% of the snaps to 39% for Jamal Williams. I see that distancing. I do see Jamal Williams getting some work in the passing game, and I think some of that will hold up. Here's the deal. Aaron Jones played on several 3rd and longs, so it isn't like they didn't trust him. So I heard some folks saying, Jamal Williams is the pass. No, he's not. He's getting part of it. Consider it to be more like what we talked about with Marlon Mack and Naheem Hines. Now, Jamal Williams isn't as good as Naheem Hines as a design pass catcher, but he was out there for the 2-minute drill. You also got to remember context, right? Jamal Williams was out there for a couple of drives that actually strung out to end up being the longer drives. And it wasn't because of what Jamal Williams was doing. It's just the way the drives worked out. And so he got more plays. I think you're going to see about a 70-30% Aaron Jones to Jamal Williams in a normal game. I do think Jamal Williams will get some of the passing work. But Aaron Jones, if you have an owner in your league that's down on it, man, they're still learning the scheme, and he was close even against this Bears defense. There's a couple plays where he lost his balance a little bit. He's going to pop some big runs. Now, he's got another tough matchup this weekend against Minnesota, which may really create an opportunity to buy low. Mm-hmm. So, I'm not saying he's going to be great this week, but I'm still buying on Aaron Jones. Marquise Valdez-Scantling, what else do I need to say, Drake? He's the dude. He's going to be great. He had cramps. Had he not had cramps, he's a must-own in every format. Even in smaller leagues, you have to own Marquise Valdez-Scantling. Hey, Dwayne, would you rather own John Brown or Marquise Valdez-Scantling? Marquise Valdez-Scantling. I would rather own than John Brown. I would rather own Marquise Valdez-Scantling than Marquise Brown. I would rather own Marquise Valdez-Scantling than insert some name here for me, Drake. I don't know, but I'm telling you, this guy is on a trajectory with his learning curve. Aaron Rodgers loves him. He's playing all the 12 and 21. He's keeping Geronimo Allison on the bench. Oh, by the way, Trevor Williams is evidently Marquise Valdez-Scantling's handcuff. Geronimo Allison couldn't even get on the field when Marquise Valdez-Scantling was in the locker room getting an IV or whatever was going on.
And on the Bears, we'll quickly touch on them. And if you've got Allen Robinson, good for you. He's a stud. Mitch Trubisky doesn't look great. He's a guy. I mean, he played 1 year of college football, and then he became a top 3 pick.
Yeah,
I just don't think Mitch Trubisky's that good.
He doesn't look good, Drake. The good news is they're pushing the ball down the field. He had 7 attempts over 20 yards, which was one of the better, numbers over the weekend. However, he only hit 2 of those, and that's what happens with Mitch Trubisky. He's boom bust. He did the same thing last year. Now he'll have his week where he's going to hit 6 of 7, but he's very erratic. To your point, he's very inconsistent. Like we said, boom bust. Here's the big thing. You can't start David Montgomery anymore. Don't be hard-headed. You can't do it. Might he win this role? Yes. He could still win this role over time. But what I saw from David Montgomery was a guy that has a lot of wiggle, but not much juice. So I'm also not saying that this is just lock it in. Oh, David Montgomery's going to be the guy. I like David Montgomery. I don't hate him. I drafted him in a dynasty league, so he's a guy long-term I still like. But, man, inside zone, they like Mike Davis. Passing, they like Tyreek Cohen. So what happens, Drake, whenever all of a sudden Anthony Miller's healthy and Trey Burton's healthy and Tyreek Cohen's not getting to split wide? You're going to see even more Tyreek Cohen in the backfield. You could see David Montgomery's snaps actually go down before they go up. So don't force David Montgomery. Be willing to have him on your bench when he blows up. And then let's go look at it and see, did he blow up with 35% of the touches and he got lucky and he broke one run? Or was it because they shifted and they moved more to David Montgomery? That's what we need to see. The pre-indicator folks should be watching for is he needs to be on the field more when they're passing the ball, only 28%. So either it's they don't trust him in pass pro, but they say they really love Mike Davis's route running. So there's just a lot going on here, Drake. You just gotta sit back and avoid starting either Mike Davis or David Montgomery at this point. Tyreek Cohen is fine. So folks, it's week 1. Don't go crazy. Don't go drop all your good players. Still be aggressive on the waiver wire, aggressive targeting, buy low candidates in trades. And we're going to be here for you all season long, all right? Because that's what we do here on The Hustle. Thank you, folks, for joining us. Appreciate you sitting there and going through 32 teams with us. It was awesome. For Dwain McFarland of Football Guys, I am Brian Drake of FightingChanceFantasy.com. Good luck on the waiver wire. Good luck in week 2, and we'll catch you guys next week.
This has been the Fantasy Football Hustle. We're back next week with all you need for waiver wire, trades, roster management, and more. Until then, never get out hustled.